There are possibly 5 seats left to fill on the Formula 1 grid for the 2023 season, with Alpine, Alfa Romeo, possibly AlphaTauri, Haas, and Williams still leaving us uncertain as to who's going to be in their driver pairings for next season. So today we're going to delve into the rumours that are circulating up and down the Formula 1 grid and pick 3 drivers that look like they're most likely to find themselves slotting into those available seats. The first driver that comes to mind for the French team is, of course, the French driver himself. He goes by the name of Pierre Gasly, and he's been absolutely sublime over the last few years in Formula 1. He has recently signed a contract with AlphaTauri just before the summer break, but he even said himself, it's been 5 years with AlphaTauri and we'll see if I do another year there. At the moment, this is what's planned. He then went on to add, these guys at AlphaTauri gave me my first win in Formula 1 and my first chance in Formula 1. It doesn't mean I have to stay there all my life. So with Gasly happy to leave AlphaTauri and Alpine seemingly willing to pay off his Red Bull contract, it's looking more and more likely that Pierre Gasly is going to be wearing blue next season. Although if that does fall through, the alternative seems to be recent Formula 1 debutant and point scorer Nick de Vries. After an incredible performance last time out in a Williams, the once nearly man who was overlooked by so many teams in the last 3 years seems to have put himself onto the top of the wish list for many teams going into 2023. Even being the reserve choice behind Pierre Gasly for the 4th fastest team on the Formula 1 grid is an incredible achievement in itself, considering that he's only had 1 race weekend of experience in the worst car on the Formula 1 grid. The third choice now for that Alpine seat seems to be Daniel Ricciardo, after he's come to an agreement with McLaren to leave at the end of the 2022 season, being replaced by Oscar Piastri. Rewinding back a few weeks, many had Daniel Ricciardo as the #1 target for Alpine. He'd worked in the team before, he's shown throughout his Formula 1 career that he has real talent and now experience behind that too. But as the races have progressed, Daniel Ricciardo has become less enticing, maybe due to the high price tag that comes with an 8-time race winner and the fact that he hasn't been able to find any real form in that McLaren car. I think honestly he's now a last resort for Alpine if they can't get either Gasly or de Vries. The next seat available on the Formula 1 grid is at the soon-to-be leaving Formula 1 Alfa Romeo team. And this is a tricky one to call because Sauber now know that Alfa Romeo are leaving, and therefore they might start to plan ahead a little bit for the 2024 campaign and see 2023 as a bit of a transitional year. At the moment, that second seat alongside Valtteri Bottas is with Chinese rookie Zhou Guanyu, and if Alfa Romeo are sensible, I think they should stick with him for the 2023 campaign. He's already settled into the team, he has some really solid performances in that car that has been absolutely atrocious when it's come to reliability. And if Alfa Romeo were able to keep pace with the rest of the pack when it comes to upgrades, we may have seen a little bit more from him in his rookie year. On top of that, with Sauber now knowing that Alfa Romeo are leaving at the end of the 2023 season, they probably don't want to go out and spend a huge amount of money on a big Formula 1 marquee name, especially if their plans for 2024 fall apart a little bit when they've got a perfectly reasonable driver in Zhou Guanyu. The only thing I think may get in the way of Zhou keeping his seat is if Sauber are assessing their options for 2024 when there's a lot of change coming to that team. They may not want to bring a brand new driver in at that crazy time. So then I think they would opt to make changes this year in preparation, and in that case I think they'd probably bring in their Formula 2 junior, Theo Pourchaire, who's had a pretty good 2022 himself. So if Sauber do want to get their junior driver into Formula 1, this might be the perfect time to pull the trigger. He seems ready for a Formula 1 seat, and on top of that he gets a year's experience before the craziness occurs and the changes occur in 2024. Especially as the move away from Alfa Romeo looks to be a move towards German manufacturer Audi, as they've confirmed they're becoming a Formula 1 engine manufacturer in 2026. This could be the final twist in the tail for that Alfa Romeo seat, because if Audi have a little bit of a hand in who gets that 2023 seat alongside Valtteri Bottas, they may opt to go for a different driver entirely. Which is why the third choice for that Alfa Romeo seat, in my opinion, looks to be German driver Mick Schumacher. It's looking more and more likely that he'll leave Haas at the end of this season and therefore be looking for a drive, whilst Audi would love, like many other teams, to have a driver that matches the nationality of the brand. So if Zhou and Pourchaire are overlooked, then Mick could be the driver to come in while he's still young, he's still got a lot of talent that's yet to be fully fulfilled, and the team can build around him because he matches the German brand. Then there's the question looming over AlphaTauri. If Pierre Gasly does make that move across to Alpine, then who comes in alongside the recently announced Yuki Tsunoda for 2023? I think their first choice in Hertha looks to have fallen through, but I think AlphaTauri will keep the Indy Star in mind as long as they possibly can and do everything they can to get him into that seat next year. It's been discussed a lot recently that even though he's in IndyCar, the FIA just do not respect that sport, and therefore he doesn't get the super license points required to come into Formula 1. I think it's all about getting that American branding into the Red Bull franchise, and we know Red Bull having 4 seats is a huge advantage, especially when diversifying their driver lineup. If Hertha comes in, they have 4 drivers from all corners of the globe in their setup, with Verstappen, Perez, Tsunoda, and Hertha all hitting very different fan bases. He does still have the chance of getting the super license points through various means, but it might take him up until January or even February to get all those. But even then, it's a dice roll, and can AlphaTauri really afford to wait that long on a gamble? Probably not. Which leads me to the first repeat option in this video, and it's the man who's been talked about so much since that Monza Grand Prix. It's Nyck de Vries. He looks to be on the radar of a lot of Formula 1 teams right now, and I'm not going to repeat myself and all of the points that I made before, but I think he could be a really good option for AlphaTauri too. He'd come in alongside Yuki Tsunoda. Yes, he wouldn't diversify their portfolio in the same way that Herta would, but he'd be a really interesting option because he is Dutch alongside Max Verstappen. Imagine if Red Bull in a few seasons, when Sergio Perez moves on, have a double Dutch driver lineup. That could be really fun. Or if both of those options do fall through, we know that AlphaTauri always have the final option of just falling back on the plethora of Red Bull Juniors that are in Formula 2 right now. The only problem with that is that none of the Red Bull Juniors are really lighting up the grid in Formula 2 right now. Daruvala's in 5th, Lawson's in 7th, Vips is in 10th. There's not one that really stands out that is ready for Formula 1 and ready to step up into that AlphaTauri seat. And with Yuki Tsunoda not having the greatest Formula 1 season either right now, they need a driver that can come in and get them some points. Which you could also say about the next team who have a seat available, as Haas needs somebody to complement Kevin Magnussen. At this moment in time, their number one target to replace Mick Schumacher seems to be another German driver in Nico Hülkenberg. He's found himself in a situation where he's had to play super sub over the last few seasons, but he's probably looking for that one final chance at a full-time Formula 1 seat. And to be fair, he's shown that he can be a very capable and very safe pair of hands in Formula 1. I think that's what Haas are kind of looking for. They're looking for a driver who's going to get around the track, not cause any damage to the car, and pick up points when they're available. And Nico Hülkenberg is one of the most competent and experienced Formula 1 drivers that is available to them. And the reason that I think Haas are desperate for a safe pair of hands in Formula 1 is because they've also been linked to Antonio Giovinazzi, who again, as we've seen at Alfa Romeo, can be an incredibly competent driver in Formula 1. Yes, okay, the Italian is not the quickest driver on the grid, but he's very, very consistent. You know exactly what you're getting from him every single race weekend. Although I feel like he's probably slightly less likely to pick you up some points in comparison to Nico Hülkenberg, and therefore goes into the second place spot when it comes to that Haas seat. Although if neither of those two experienced drivers work out, they could go for their third rookie in 3 seasons, using their links to Ferrari and bring in Schwartzman. Schwartzman is another one of those rookies that's been on the peripheries of Formula 1. We've seen him at various Grand Prix with Ferrari, and he's looking closer and closer to being able to grant himself a full Formula 1 seat. Obviously, he doesn't have the experience of a Nico Hülkenberg or a Giovinazzi, but at least they can keep Ferrari fairly happy by bringing in another one of their juniors. But then I feel like I'm speculating on Ferrari still having a little bit of influence in that second Haas seat, which Gunther Steiner has said that they don't. Which takes me to the final seat available in Formula 1 at the back of the grid with Williams for 2023. And I think the first choice for Williams, and you're going to hate me for saying it because I've already linked him to an Alpine seat and an AlphaTauri seat, but for me it should be Nyck de Vries. Coming in, working with the team already as Alex Albon's replacement for Monza, showing how much of an upgrade he is on Nicholas Latifi, Williams should be dying to get the Dutchman into that seat. Williams needs to show that they are taking steps forward, that they are trying to improve, and they're trying to get themselves off of the bottom of that constructor standings, which, let's face it, they probably would have still been on the bottom of the constructor standings had Haas not taken a year off in 2021. And of the 3 teams that I've linked Nyck de Vries with, I think he's particularly good for Williams. First of all, he's had a race weekend with them already, so he knows a little bit of the behind the scenes, and it won't take him too long to acclimatise to that Williams seat. Second of all, Williams have huge links with Mercedes, which would only get better if Nyck de Vries came into the team. And third, I think he hits the ground running and starts picking up points in the same vein as Alex Albon. The only problem is it looks like Nyck de Vries has the option to go to a team much higher up in the Formula 1 standings. In which case, I think Williams then look to their second choice, which should be Logan Sargeant. The American is having a pretty good season in Formula 2. It's not incredible, don't get me wrong, but he's shown enough now that I think if he were to come into Formula 1, it wouldn't take him too long to acclimatise. Plus, of course, he is a Williams junior and therefore has worked with the team incredibly closely already and wouldn't have that awkward getting to know you period at the beginning of next season. I don't think he'll come in and straight away be near the level of Alex Albon. I think Alex Albon will become the clear team number 1, although he's kind of been playing that role already this season. I think Sargeant could come in and have a similar sort of rookie year to what we're seeing from Zhou Guanyu this season, where he's incredibly solid, does an incredible job for the team, and possibly sneaks some points here or there. Although my third and final shout, and it's a little bit of a rogue one for Williams, is Drugovich. He's won the Formula 2 championship, he's just signed with Aston Martin, and Aston Martin might be trying to find him a seat in Formula 1 for next year. And let's face it, Aston Martin have got cash to burn, Williams might want a little bit of that Aston Martin cash, and Drugovich looks like a pretty good option. He's been incredibly quick in Formula 2 this year. So if Williams want to go completely left field, they can't get de Vries in, Sargeant maybe needs another year in Formula 2, Dragovic could be an option just for 1 year to see what he can do. But that's probably the most speculative shout of the 15 options that I've talked about in this video. So I'd love to know in the comments down below, those 5 seats, if you think Gasly is going to move to Alpine, who fills in the rest of the Formula 1 2022 grid? And whilst you're down there, leave a like on the video too. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers before the end of the season. We are getting so incredibly close. Thank you so much again, and I'll see you next time.